Hi everybody, this is Stacy from Corvum. This is my first tutorial, so hopefully you guys will have some feedback for me in terms of how you enjoyed it or what you think I should change. But what I'm going to show you today is apparently there's been a lot of questions lately about ear wires for wire jewelry, so I'm going to cover that today and hopefully help out some of you who are looking for a little more information or an easy way to do it. So that you're not having to buy a pre-made component if you choose not to do that. So the first thing I want to say is that I use almost exclusively copper wire in all of my jewelry, so my ear wires are also made of copper wire. There's been debate about whether or not to use copper as an ear wire and the reasons why you shouldn't, and so on and so forth. I'm not trying to get into the debate about that. I'm just trying to give you some technique ideas, so I'm going to stick to that part of it. I use dead soft wire all the time. When I first started wire wrapping, I used to buy half hard wire as well, and over the years I have learned that you can actually make your dead soft wire half hard or hard, and therefore it saves you having to buy more than one temper of wire and keep them separate and so on and so forth. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how I harden the wire. If you're already using half hard wire, that's fine, you don't have to go through this, but you know, or maybe if your wire's not quite as stiff as you would like it, you can still stiffen it a little bit more. And honestly, just by running my hand down it like I am, straightening it out, it is starting to work harden the wire, but I'm going to show you a good way to do that. As a side note, there are a couple different options as far as wire gauge. I use 20 gauge for all of my earrings. Some people feel that that's too heavy or it's too big, so you should go with a 21 or a 22 gauge wire. Whatever your preference, those are all decisions that you can make, you know, based on your experience and how things work for you. So I'm just going to tell you what works for me and what I do, and hopefully, you know, you get some good ideas and information that way. I'm not by any means telling you that that's the only way it can be done. So when making ear wires, obviously you need some wire. If you're going to harden that wire, I use a power drill. This is a, let's see if I can get it in the picture here. This is a $20, actually I think it was $18. It's a cordless drill from Harbor Freight, rechargeable with a battery. If you're going to spend a lot of time doing wire work, I recommend you get a cheap power drill because it does save you a lot of time, not just for this, but for other things, which hopefully we'll have some tutorials on as we go forward. So that's number one. A bench block or something you can hammer on that's flat and hard. At one point in my life, I actually used the backside of a cast iron pan because when I started, I didn't have a lot of money to buy supplies. You know, and I was trying to do things without making a big investment because I was learning. So, you know, it doesn't have to be this. Use what you have. If you don't, this is a chasing hammer, you can tell by the rounded face. If you don't have a hammer like this, this is like the cheapest one you can get from Rio, and you can tell that the chrome is actually peeling off the face. So it's not a forever hammer, but I think I maybe paid like $15 for this hammer. They're handy. They're nice. You can use a regular hammer, you just have to be really careful not to dent up your wire and mark it up. But in any case, you will need something to hammer with. Flush cutters, if you're doing wire work, I'm assuming that you already have a pair of flush cutters and that you already kind of have an idea how they work. I love these little tiny chain nose pliers. Let's see if you can see the point on those. It's really, really tiny. So they get into small spaces and they have a lot of good applications, even in terms of making curls and things like that. So these are super handy. And then I just have a pair of flat nose pliers here. Any flat plier will work for what we're going to do today. And then I have some round nose pliers, which are another tool that you should really have in your wire arsenal, just because they have so many applications. Also, you're going to need a file of some sort, or even an emery board or sandpaper will work. I've used all those things. So, but these, I have a cheap set of jewelry files, also from Harbor Freight. If you have one near you, these come, I think there's 10 different files in the pack, and I use these all the time. You know, so it's another thing that's kind of cheap, that's effective, and I think was a good investment. Another thing that you can use though is this little thing is actually for sharpening fish hooks. So I got mine on Amazon because my local Walmart doesn't carry these, and when I asked the guy at Walmart for one of these, he told me that no such thing existed. So go on Amazon if you want one. And basically what it is it's like a file, but it has these grooves in it. Let's see if I can get it up close here. It has these grooves in it, so you can use these to, oops, there we go, to file the ends of your wire down, and it's really effective for that. You could also use a cup burr. I don't own one. They're just something that I've always been able to manage without, so I've never bothered to buy one. You know, obviously if you want one, certainly pick one up. I've heard they're great. It's just, I try to keep things to a minimum. Colored pencil is my secret weapon for making ear wires. And I use a colored pencil because the body of the pencil doesn't have the flat edges on it, so you're going to get a nice smooth curve if you use this when you wrap your wire around. So that's why I use a colored pencil, but anything like this will work. A big, you know, knitting needle that's the right size, or a crochet hook that's the right size will work. Pretty much I've made do over the years with things around my house, and you know, so if you're just starting out, you may not have all the fancy tools, you know, bail pliers and things like that, you know, or things that have a specific purpose like that. I don't have a lot of tools that only do one job because, frankly, I don't have the space and I don't have the money. So, but my kids always have colored pencils, so I just steal one when they're not looking. And any kind of ruler, if you're into measuring. I tend not to measure things, which sometimes comes back to haunt me, but you know, if you want to be consistent, then you'll want to have a ruler. So that being said, let's just kind of jump in. You're going to cut yourself a length of wire. Now I'm trying to keep things in frame here, so I'm using a shorter piece. You can do this with a longer piece and it works just fine. It works the same. But when you start, what you'll do is turn up the very end of your wire. And it's a little L shape. And what you're doing is you're trying to give the drill a place to grab on. So you're going to open up your drill on the end. I know this is hard to see, but you're going to put that, really hard to see, you're going to put that wire inside the drill and close it down. And see that little tail is kind of sticking out the side. That's why you need that. We're going to allow the drill to hang on to the wire. If you just put straight wire in here, no matter how tight you clamp this down, when you start to spin this wire, it will come loose. So please be safe when you do this. Leave a little tail so that your drill can hold on to the wire. Okay, now on the other end of the wire, you're going to use your pliers to hold it, but your pliers also need a place to hold on. So we're going to take this end and curl it also. Now when I do this, I curl it completely over so that it makes a little U shape. Oh, there we go. And then what I'm going to do is get a good hold of that with my pliers. And I like to go back down into the jaw so that I know I have a good grip. Okay, now when you turn your drill on, you want to have just a little bit of tension between the drill and the pliers. So you're going to pull on that wire just enough to keep it straight. You don't want to yank on it. We're not trying to stretch it. If you pull it too hard and you spin it too far, the wire will break. Okay, so that's not what we're looking for. We want just a nice easy pressure on it. And as you start to spin it, you'll see, at least on my wire, what I see is a little spiral pattern that actually shows up in the wire. So that, after a while, you'll start to figure out how close those little lines need to be for you to have the right temper of wire. So this is, hopefully you can see it. It has a little spring to it. I'm going to spin it a little further because for me, I like to make sure that my ear wires are going to hold up. There we go. Just be careful when you let go with the pliers that the wire doesn't spring back at you. So what I will normally do when I make ear wires is make 30 or 40 sets at a time. So what I do is I spin a longer piece of wire and then I cut it into pieces and I work off that. So I'll do maybe 5 or 8 long pieces of wire and then start cutting those to length and then make my ear wires as I go along. So we're going to snip off the ends because we don't need those anymore. And they were squished in the drill anyway, so they're shot. So from here, I would say I usually go about 2.5 inches. I'd like to have extra. Don't short yourself. Copper wire is not real expensive. You're better off, especially when you're just starting to get the hang of this. Give yourself a little bit extra room because you can't add wire on. You can always trim it off. You can't add it back on. And when it's too short, it's too short. So I like to say about 2.5 inches gives more than enough for an ear wire. And from there, you're going to bend this. And what you're looking to do is bend it all the way back on itself so that these wires come parallel to each other. Now the reason that we're doing that is because we're going to make 2 ear wires at one time. And I do that because that will keep them the same size, which a little variance might not look like much when you're making the wire itself, but when you put a dangle on it or a drop on it, if your wire's off by a little bit, your earring length is going to be off by a little bit, and then you're going to put it on an earring card maybe and set it for sale, and then they're not going to be even. So do yourself a favor and just do 2 at a time so they match. And then you can trim that piece off even. So now we have sort of what looks like a little pin type thing. Bent on one end, open on the other. Now take your round nose pliers. We're going to start with the end where you'll actually attach your earring drop. So we're going to make the loop first. So bear in mind when you make your loop that we're going to have to trim this little end off at some point. So we need the loop to be just a little bit bigger than we want the finished loop to be. And then come around your plier, even pressure. When you're going around your round nose pliers, what you really want to do is to make a nice circle. Start the motion with your wrist, but then you kind of want to use your thumb and push the wire over the plier rather than trying to pull the wire through. Okay, almost like you're folding the wire, because that way you're going to get a nice, even, tight curve that's going to stay where you put it. It's not going to spring back at you, which it has a tendency to do sometimes. If you were to be out here and pull it, you're not going to get the best shape. So stay close to the plier and use your thumb and push that wire around, and that will give you a little bit better result. Okay, now because we're doing a really super simple wire, what I'm going to do is take that colored pencil or whatever tool you're using, okay, and I'm going to take the little loop that we just made and hold it between my thumb and my index finger, and I'm going to put that wire against the pencil. And again, I'm going to push with my thumb and push that wire down around the surface of the pencil. Okay, now when I get so I can't reach from that angle, then I'll flip it over, hold the wire against the pencil body, and continue to push it. So that's going to give you a nicely shaped curve for the top of your ear wire. Okay, now there's all different ways to make these, different sizes, different lengths. Keep in mind, whatever you hang on here, you're going to have the additional length of the ear wire. Some people like them to be really, really short. Sometimes I make them just because it's fun to do something different. Sometimes I'll make this part really long, you know, maybe a single bead, but a really long ear wire, so it gives it a different look. So you can play around with that and find what you're comfortable with and what works for you. Now, I'll take my flat pliers, and I do mine just below where this little loop falls. I do my that little kick out that these wires have. And I don't know, I guess it's about maybe 45 degrees or so, however you want to do them. And there you can see you already have your basic ear wire. So now, come back in with your flush cutters and make sure that you're using the flush side toward the ear wire, because you want this to be flat. And I give, I don't know, about 1/4 of an inch or so. It doesn't need to be a big tail, but you need to have a little space there. And just trim that off. Okay, so there's your basic ear wire shape. Maybe if I put it here you can see it better. Super simple. It was pretty quick to do. Obviously I talked a lot. I always talk a lot. That notwithstanding, you can get these done pretty quick. So now we can come back up here with our flush cutters. And again, make sure that you're cutting this with the flush side of the cutter toward the earring, not toward the waist piece. Okay, you want that to be flat also. And just trim off that little tiny U shape where we bent the wire. And then that separates your ear wires, so now you have your 2 wires. And then you can just take your round pliers and finish closing off that loop. Now these don't need to be super tight, because don't forget you're going to open this up again when you put your earring drop on. So we're just trying to get the shape and close it up. Now sometimes these get a little, maybe they're not completely flat or it's a little off. That's fine. Just take your whatever flat pliers and straighten it out. And sometimes what I even do, if it looks like it's been, you know, gotten a little misshapen, I'll just come back and put this whole part. Now you have to do this gently. You don't want to crush the wire. So, but with gentle pressure, just give it a little squeeze and it'll flatten right back out again. Okay. Now the next step is you want to hammer these ear wires so that we're sure that they're stable. I'm going to put this down here for just a second so I can show you where I'm actually hammering. So you don't want to hammer the loop itself, because we don't want to make that so brittle that when you open it, it breaks off. Then you're back at square one and you have to start over. Ask me how I know that. So you want to keep your hammering confined to this area right here. So the front curve of the ear wire is really where you want the hammering to take place. And the reason that we do that is to keep it steady and keep it stable and make sure that this front side of the ear wire is going to hold its shape. This is where the weight of the earring is going to be, so you want to make sure that this is definitely sturdy, especially if you're going to go with a 21 or a 22 gauge wire. You want to make sure that it's stable enough to hold whatever you put on it. And now we don't need to hammer this a lot. If you're using a chasing hammer, this actually is going to spread the metal. So what I would recommend you do, first of all, watch your fingers. You don't need to hit this hard. You just need to tap it. By the way, I keep my bench block on a towel because it absorbs some of the noise, which tends to really irritate my little guy for some reason. But anyhow, it kind of muffles it. So you're just going to tap it gently, like I said. Now you can see that this ear wire is now, it's not flat again. Okay, so then I turn it over on the other side, and I just really gently tap it on this side until it straightens out and it lays flat. Okay, I'm going to do that with the other one as well. So there's your basic ear wire, and the last thing you have to do, and this is really important, you want to try your ear wires yourself to make sure that, or if for some reason your ears aren't pierced or you can't try it yourself, have a friend try these or someone in your home. Even though we use flush cutters on these, the end is still sharp, okay? So we need to file this. Now, a flush cutter is going to give you a 90-degree cut. So kind of like the end of this ruler, it's going to be square. So if this is your wire and then you cut it, it's flat like this. So you have these corners here, okay? And this is what's going to cause pain when you try to put that through your ear. So that's what we want to get rid of. So the whole idea here is to come in with whatever abrasive tool you're going to use, whether it's a file or it's an emery board or whatever it is. You want to take that little part off that wire so that you're rounding it so that it will comfortably slide through the skin. So that being said, you want to make sure that when you're filing, you don't file straight at a 90-degree angle on your wire. You're going to file at an angle, okay? Hopefully that makes sense the way I'm explaining it. And what you're going to do is just kind of go all the way around and use your fingers to guide you until you've got a nice rounded wire end. Okay, it doesn't take a lot of filing, but it is imperative that you do this. This is a mandatory step in making ear wires because you don't want to be poking your customers, or, you know, even if you're not selling, if you're giving it to friends and family or what have you, you don't want to be poking them with the ear wire. So make sure that the end is filed off. You know, like I said, try it yourself or have someone else try it. Please do not sell ear wires that you've used on yourself that you haven't at least cleaned really well. That's just hygiene. But whatever, so once you go around and file off that rough edge, there you go. So really, now I talked the whole way through this and I slowed down to show you all my steps, but you can actually make a set of ear wires in, you know, a couple minutes. And like I said, do a bunch at a time. If you're going to do a lot of earrings, rather than doing one pair every time you finish a pair of earrings, do a whole bunch of these. And then the best way to keep these, because you need to keep the pairs together so that you know that your ear wires are exactly the same. So what I would recommend you do is get some Scotch tape and a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard. When you finish a pair of earrings, put them together and Scotch tape them to the board so you know that that pair is a pair. And that way, when you finish your earrings, you know you have matching ear wires to put on. Because like I said, the length is really important, and even though it may not look like a big difference when you're making them or if they're just laying on your bench, once you put those earrings on an earring card and that length doesn't match, it's really going to show up. So just be careful of that. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to do another video shortly here with different options for different shaped ear wires. And different things that you can play with, but for now that should get you started. And if you have any questions, you can let me know. You can email me at knoxcorvum@gmail.com, and I will add the information to the description of the video so that you can find my email address if you have questions. Have a great day.